And I think you can see some of that in Adorno and Horkheimer. So what we get in if we take the essay on the culture industry and sort of focus on that, what we get is, I think, an interesting recoding of the way that Marx had talked about individuality. So for Marx, individuality is one of these great examples of a kind of immanent possibility. That's immanent with an A, not an I. So that is possibilities of transforming the world, which are created by the world itself. So capitalism makes us into individuals. I've spoken a bit about that, in Lukács, how we become possessive individuals. But the full realization of individuality is actually the work of communism. I'm not a kind of rounded, free individual who can choose my own projects for myself if I'm disciplined by a division of labor that says I have to sit in Adam Smith's pin factory and do the same boring work all the time, right? So capitalism makes me into an individual, but it can't realize individuality. And so I actually think that the realization of individuality is central to the normative frame through which Marx understands communism. Now, there's a positive kind of dialectic in which capitalism creates individuality and then the negation of capitalism makes possible a real individuality. Well, Adorno and Horkheimer have famously a negative dialectics framed by this experience of defeat, a dialectical process that doesn't assume the happy resolution at the end of the story. And so they give us in the culture industry a story in which capitalism not only creates individuality, but then by the pervasiveness of an ethic of endless accumulation that invades every aspect of our life and turns it into commodities, and by the growth of increasingly monopolistic forms of life that through monopolistic capitalists give us the same products all the time. Not only does capital create individuality and makes me an individual abstract citizen, it also destroys my individuality and makes everyone the consumer of exactly the same kind of music, exactly the same kind of TV, exactly the same radio programs, because successful businesses have outcompeted their rivals and sort of monopolized the market. So individualism ends up producing its opposite. Funnily enough, in the 1830s, this was Tocqueville's aristocratic anxiety about individualism. He thought individualism was going to produce actually homogeneity. And Adorno and Horkheimer have some resonance of the Tocquevillian aristocratic anxiety, I think, in them. And so you see here the capitalist roots. This is why the argument has such a political punch, right? You see the capitalist roots of something like fascist totalitarianism, rather than thinking there's this thing called liberal democracy, and it's clearly the opposite of a fascist state where rather than having variety, you have homogeneity dictated by a leader. Instead, you see how the marketplace has produced the kinds of homogeneity that can then make you move relatively seamlessly, Adorno and Horkheimer fear, from everyone sitting down in their living rooms together to listen to the same piece of music on the radio, to everyone sitting down in their living rooms to listen to the same speech from a Nuremberg rally. You might think that a grand shift, and as I say, their writing framed, I think, by a deep sense of despair and anxiety. But they're highlighting the degree to which individuality is destroyed by the coming of a capitalist homogeneity.
Yeah, that's